Great. I think given the success of Brett before, I'm going to change my whole talk and I'm going to continue on with the sex stuff, Kirk, okay? So we'll... No. As someone who's had almost 15 years of helping probably thousands of people now to get well and stay well, what I'd like to do is invite you on a journey. And I want you to imagine that we're perhaps walking down the streets of a new and exotic city, overwhelmed with that sense of awe that perhaps only comes when we get to experience something new. There's new sights and new sounds. And have you ever noticed that when you're in a new country, that even the colours seem different? And as we're walking along, we come to a corner and there's that sense of excitement because we know that there's adventure around the corner. But this time, as we round the corner, we're pushed back by a tidal wave of disgustingness. You see, right across the road is garbage. And the only thing worse than the garbage is the actual smell of it. And our nose burns and our chest tightens as we quickly race across the road in an effort to get away from the junk. And something catches our eyes. You see, the road and that garbage there is covered in rats. There's literally hundreds of rats. And then we notice something else, because there's a group of people working with almost military precision, dressed oddly like surgeons, the white face mask and the scrubs on. And what they appear to be doing is laying rat traps and rat poison. But the whole process seems pointless because, you see, each time one of those traps goes off, there are two rats that seem to take its place. And in an effort to get further and further away, we bump into one of the workers and we can't help but ask, "What are you doing?" And the worker responds to us with a tremendous passion. And he goes on to say, he says, "No street should ever have to suffer the disgust of rats, the horror, the terror of rats." He says, "So we're killing the rats." And he said, "We had a tremendous scientific breakthrough just last week." He said, "Because we've now worked out how to genetically alter the trash so the rats will no longer be attracted to it." Now, overwhelmed with a sense of the obvious, we can't help but ask, why don't you just clean up the trash? And you see, this time, now with a sense of arrogance, he responds back to us. He says, it's the rats that are the problem, not the trash. You see, this metaphor is the absolutely perfect metaphor for what goes on with our current healthcare system. We spend thousands, if not billions of dollars, many hours each and every year fighting sickness and disease, the rats. And we have greater access now than ever to hospitals, doctors, medications, surgeries, the rat traps and the rat poisons. Yet oddly, we spend very little time, effort and energy in actually cleaning up the trash. Prevention. And at a time now when our scientists are beginning to say that our youngest generation, our generation of babies, may be the first generation in history that actually won't outlive their parents. And the increase in diabetes and obesity and cancer and diseases like that will set to change things forever. And we've wrongly bought into a whole bunch of myths. We've been told that health is something that comes from outside in, that we can get healthy from a pill or a potion or even a vitamin for that matter. And we've all been told that health is so hard. And we've been told that health is so complex that it's something we need to delegate to a team of experts. Experts who will tell us how to eat, move and think, and experts who have greater and greater knowledge of smaller and smaller parts of our body. And whilst I'm all for delegation, there are some things in our life that we should never delegate. You know, the raising of our children, our finances, our spirituality. And I think health is another one of those things, particularly when you look at the results that we're getting nowadays. And so I think the time now is more important than ever. Then what we need to start doing is cleaning the trash, so to speak. But you know what? It's probably more complicated than ever for us to begin that journey as well. So what I want to do this afternoon is share 3 simple, powerful, and life-changing strategies to help you clean the trash, so to speak. Having had, I guess I've probably read hundreds, if not thousands of books on eating and nutritional articles, and I can boil my whole understanding of eating down into 4 simple words. And that is that we should eat foods from nature. And having dealt with Olympic athletes and world record holders, leaders of industry and newborn babies and everywhere in between, then nowhere is there more confusion and misunderstanding than there is in the field of nutrition. And it's no wonder, because everything that we've been told at some stage seems to be changing now. And when we look to the prestigious school of Harvard Public Health, then just recently they released an article that tells us that the low-fat campaign, the way that you and I have been told to eat over the last 50 years has in fact been based on very little of any science whatsoever, and may well have in fact caused a great deal of unintentional health issues. And one of the saddest things about that is that's 50 years of you and I drinking skinny lattes for no reason whatsoever. And you see, from the moment that we began to think of food in terms of health, and it's a relatively new idea, from the moment that we started to do that, our health started to go downhill. You see, we don't see food anymore, we see nutrients. And along with that has come a tremendous sense of guilt, of worry and anxiety. And Paul Rosen, a fantastic psychologist from the University of Pennsylvania, did a really neat little study where he got a picture of a beautiful piece of chocolate cake and he showed it to a group of people. And he wanted to find out what was the word that they thought of most when they saw this chocolate cake. And the word that came up mostly was guilt. And then he took that same picture, but this time he showed it to the French. Now the French is a culture that's confused the nutritional world since its existence because they eat more fat and they smoke more and they drink more, yet they have a lower incidence of disease than just about anywhere in the Western culture. So this same word showed to the French, and the word that they came up with was celebration. You see, we worry and stress more about food than ever now, and it's flat out just not good for us. And history has given us a great indication of how we should fuel our body, because we have generations that have lived long, healthy and disease-free lives, and we need to just follow what they do. We can look at the American Indians who had a diet almost entirely of carbohydrates. Maize and beans is basically what they existed on, disease-free. And then we can look at the Maasai tribes over in Africa who existed almost entirely on protein. Cow's milk and cow's blood and meat. And again, were disease-free, lived a long, healthy life. And then we look at the Inuit from Greenland who existed entirely on fat. The same fat that we call artery-clogging fat. The same fat that we're told that ends up on our belly and our bum, and yet they had no obesity, they had no cancer, they had no heart disease. And whilst there's tremendous variation in all of these groups, the one thing they had in common is they all ate foods from nature. And when we begin to eat foods from nature, then wonderful things start to happen. And you can expect to move towards a healthier weight, but we need to be careful here, because a smaller weight on the scales or a smaller number on the scales doesn't necessarily mean you're healthier. There are many things that we can do to drop kilos. We can chop an arm off and that's probably good for 5 or 6 kilos, but I would contend that we'd not be any healthier for doing it. But when we eat foods from nature, we can expect a healthier blood pressure and better blood chemistry and greater ease of digestion. And sadly nowadays, as a culture, we don't understand what healthy digestion looks or feels like. Now, I had the most amazing picture of what healthy digestion, I didn't really eat this. But we don't understand what that looks like anymore. So we've become so mixed up. And we've been told that eating is complex. And Michael Pollan, in his book Food Rules, gives us some incredibly simple tips. He says that if your great-grandmother wouldn't have eaten it or recognised it, then we shouldn't either. And he goes on to say that we should avoid all foods that make a health claim. And whilst on the surface that might seem a little counterintuitive, he goes on to say that in order for a food to make a health claim on its package, it has to have a package. And if it has a package, then the chance of it being processed is significantly higher. And when I'm asked the question of all ages, the one we all want to know is, how do I go about giving up my chocolate? Then I answer with perhaps one of the greatest diet tips that I've ever been told, and that is we just simply don't buy it. You know, it's much, much easier for us to change our environment than it is to change our behaviour. We know that if you have a bowl of chocolate on your desk at work, the closer it is to you, then the more that you'll eat. And whilst many of us might be happy to get off the couch at night and walk over to the fridge and get some chocolate out, you know, we're unlikely to get out of our pyjamas and drive down to 7-Eleven and do the same thing. Frank Booth is an exercise physiologist. And he has some wonderful, wonderful work. And he tells us now that we live amongst the laziest people that have ever lived. And now inactivity, our laziness, is now the 3rd leading cause of death in the Western world. Which leads me to my second tip, and that is in order for us to clean the trash, we need to move often. Oh, we've got it all happening now. And I think one of the great reasons that we've struggled with exercise is there's a real focus when it comes to exercise on the physical. There's a real focus on the aesthetic benefits of it. But as our researchers are now beginning to really clearly tell us, is that the benefit of exercise, guys, is probably even more significant on the mental, emotional side of things. Regular exercise is more likely to lead to a greater sense of happiness than a $30,000 pay rise. We know that regular walking outdoes an antidepressant medication. We know that the more that our kids move, then the better they do at school. But in order for us to understand movement, then we've got to understand the formula for movement. And it comes in three kinds. We've got to move often, but mostly at a slow pace. And this is all about incidental exercise. This is all about taking the stairs instead of the lift. It's about getting on the bus a stop later or getting off a stop earlier for that matter. Instead of having the car park right out the front of work or the shopping centre, it's parking around the corner. It's actually playing with our kids around at the park. And it doesn't have to be going to the gym if that's not your thing. And of course, we're designed to sprint occasionally. When our hunter-gatherer ancestors had those all-out bursts of energy in order to hunt or prevent hunting, then after that, their body was flooded with beautiful health-giving hormones. Hormones that were rich in anti-aging, hormones that boosted the metabolism, that boosted the immune system. And of course, every now and then, we need to lift heavy things. With a real focus, guys, on functional movements, pushing and pulling and squatting and lunging. And again, if the gym's not your thing, then that's okay. And as you begin to move your body more, then you're going to notice an increase in energy. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but the person who often wins in life is very often the person with the most energy. And whilst we spend a tremendous amount of time with a real focus on time management, we've all forgotten about energy management. I mean, what could you do with more energy? How could you greater contribute to your community, to your family, to your partner? You know, could you write that extra sales letter at work? Could you contribute to something greater in your community? You see, we spend a great deal of time focusing on our businesses, but very little time focusing on our bodies. And that resource of human health now is incredibly rare because of it. And we're now starting to see that our teenagers are more stressed now than the teenagers were during the Great Depression. And this makes sense when we understand that happiness has very little to do with our surroundings, our possessions or the events, and has everything to do with perception. And Gregory Burns, who was a neurologist, a brain expert, in his book Iconoclast tells us this. And he talks about the difference between vision and perception. And he says vision is that process by which photons taken in from the eyes and are converted into neural signals in the brain. But he says perception is all about interpretation. And interpretation explains how two people can witness the same event but can come up with drastically different explanations. Now, for those of you that are married, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And many of you will have seen this picture behind me beforehand. And as some of you look at it right now, you see an old, decrepit woman. And some of you see a young, beautiful woman. And when it comes to your health, what you notice matters, and it matters a lot. And that leads me to my third step, and that is that we need to be grateful for our life. Do you know that the mere act of sitting down for 5 minutes a day, of noticing what is great about your life, not only does that lead to an increased sense of optimism, a greater sense of happiness, but do you know that people who do that are more likely to eat better? They're more likely to exercise more regularly, and they're more likely to have a greater overall sense of health. And when we've been told that health is out hard work, 5 minutes a day, and it has far-reaching impacts on all levels of not just your health and well-being, but your whole family's health and well-being as well. And earlier on this week, I was talking to an amazing business coach, a woman who has a tremendous message to share. And she was telling me that she had to cancel a whole weekend seminar because her body broke down. She literally couldn't get herself out of bed. Now, not only will she have lost a tremendous amount of money because the venue was booked and people flying from all over Australia, but the worst thing about that is there are a whole group of people that would miss out on her magic because she couldn't share it. And whilst I understand at times it's difficult for us to be grateful, I was humbled recently to give a talk to a group of disabled people, and we're talking about happiness. And I was moved by the depth of gratitude that these people had for what was actually working in their life. And so the mere fact that we're sitting in this room right now puts us amongst the most lucky people in the world. And I've always taken great pride in being thankful for the simple things. You know, I'm thankful for the people that put the tyres on my car so I can stop quickly if I need be, for the people that laid the pipes, allow my house to get clean, fresh water, for the people at lunchtime that provided that food for us. And not a day goes by that I'm not wonderfully thankful for my beautiful family and friends. You see, our bodies don't need to be breaking down any longer. Our streets no longer need to be littered with trash. And the answer is not in killing the rats. The answer is in cleaning up the trash. We don't have to buy into that concept that it's hard work or that it's too complex. And fundamental to us making this change will be letting go of the idea that health is something that comes from outside to in. Because that same concept that is causing our bodies to break down is also causing our planet to break down. You see, the health of our planet right now is really just a reflection of the health of the people on the planet. And at a time right now that we need to answer the tougher questions on global warming and immigration, terrorism, wars, the GFC, then we've underestimated one of the greatest resources. And that's the resource of outstanding health. And I want to remind you that regardless of what your gifts are, your purpose, your passion, is that you cannot maximise any of that if you don't have that outstanding health. And when you poison your body, then the world misses out on a piece of your magic. And that human resource of outstanding health, although it is the ultimate resource, sadly today, it's one of the most rare. And you see, a well culture has more energy. It has a greater self-esteem. You see, a well culture thinks with greater clarity and greater creativity. A well culture is more productive, and a well culture is more compassionate and caring. You see, a well culture is less of a strain on the infrastructure. And I truly believe that it will be a well culture that will ultimately make the difference. God bless. Thank you, guys.